Good morning, everyone. I just got back from the Invitational in Las Vegas, and I did okay. I got 10th. I started 8-0 day one. This is pretty similar to the deck I played. This is kind of a mishmash of mine and Todd Anderson's deck from the tournament. He played Jeskai Black with Monastery Mentor main deck. I was a little skeptical, played them in the sideboard. And ultimately, I believe that Todd was correct. So now we are revisiting the deck and trying to build it as more of a Monastery Mentor deck than it was before. So Mentor is pretty good in the mirror match, despite there being a lot of shocks running around, just because by the time that you actually want to cast it, you can probably protect it pretty well. You have things like Duress and Dispel, plus you can just play a couple spells to save it from a shock. So Mentor ended up being one of the best cards. It was, like I said, very good against Abs and aggro. I played against a ramp deck. It was very good there. Just like those decks that go over the top of you, Monastery Mentor just pressures very, very quickly, and it allows you to translate all your spells into actual threats and kill them very quickly, which Todd's deck previously was not capable of doing. So this is a little bit different than other Jeskai decks that have been around. 26 lands, pretty standard. One thing that I do want to try is Adrian Sullivan's mana base from the Standard Open that took place on Saturday and Sunday, where he cut Flooded Strain entirely, had some Wooded Foothills, and it looked like his mana was more even across the board. I think he had 15 white and red sources, 17 black and 18 blue, something like that. So by cutting Flooded Strand for Wooded Foothills, he was able to turn that into, I think, one more red and white source if you wanted to. So that might be worth looking into. Other than that, control the early game with some removal. Crackling Doom is also pretty good in the format still. And you have things like Jace to filter through your cards, get a little card advantage. You have Soulfire Grandmaster to rebuy all your spells, or maybe you wait a turn so you can drop this and a Fiery Impulse against a target red, maybe gain some life back. We have Painful Truths and Dig Through Time to be our card drawers for the end. And Ojutai's Command and Kolagon's Command also provide you a little card advantage. And since you're Creature Light, having things that can get your creatures back from the graveyard is definitely pretty nice. So one of the biggest differences is Dig instead of Cruise. In order to facilitate this, you need a second Sunken Hollow, because there are too many times where you have the Sunken Hollow and you would like to Bloodstained Mire for a second blue mana, and that's actually pretty tough with only one Sunken Hollow in your deck. So we are away from the Prairie Stream up on Sunken Hollow, which is not a perfect solution, because I think Prairie Stream is a better land in the deck. This deck has a few too many extra black sources, but that's only because all the fetch lands can find black mana. But yeah, you do need need to go Mire into second Sunken Hollow a decent amount of the time when you have Dig Through Time. But the reason for Dig over Cruise is once you are kind of loading up on Painful Truths and you're drawing a lot of hard cards, you don't necessarily want your big card drawer, like say it was a Treasure Cruise, to also just draw you raw cards. I think one of the issues that a lot of people ran into when playing decks like this was that they would flood out and just end up losing. And Dig allows you to basically almost always find two relevant spells. And I think the best way to build this deck is rely on things like Jace and Painful Truths to hit your land drops, and then have something like Dig on top of it to make sure that your spell density is high enough. So I played with the Dig Through Times in the tournament. I was very happy with them, and I will likely be building my decks like that going forward. I could also see something like a third Painful Truths and only 25 land. That's a little awkward, because you want to be able to sequence your things in such a way where your lands aren't entering the battlefield tapped, and you're slowing down a lot, and you basically want to make all your land drops too. But I do feel like the third Painful Truths kind of does that for you, and you can tell a noticeable difference from the games where you draw Painful Truths and the games where you don't, just because you end up not having enough resources. So we have a Murderous Cut kind of at the top end. There are no Taskers in this deck. Tasker was kind of underwhelming, and I think this deck can pretty easily support 3 Delve cards, so I do have a Murderous Cut in here. Since we have Monastery Mentors, and we have 3 of them, I like a Jeskai Charm. This will allow you to gain something, like 7 to 12 life, which is very, very necessary against some decks. Plus, this is a card that can just kill Gideon outright, which is nice. Plus, it combos with Soulfire Grandmaster to just like put their thing on top every turn. And yeah, since we're based on Monastery Mentor, a couple things happened. First, we are a little more sorcery speed. We are kind of like this tap out deck now, sort of with Painful Truth and Monastery Mentor. So Ojutai's Command is a little bit worse, and when you have Monastery Mentor, things like Duress become better than counter spells, but I do have room for 2 Dispel and 2 Duress, which I really like, since you can use those to protect your Monastery Mentor. So, sideboard, we have a lot of cards for Tarka Red. We have 3 Ration Cleric, 3 Radiant Flames, some cards for Abzan Aggro in Murderous Cut and Roast. Utter End probably comes in there also just to deal with Gideon and be a unconditional spot removal spell. Painful Truths for grindy matchups, but even post-board matchups like Abzan Aggro, when both players have a bunch of removal for the other person's threats, like you definitely want another Painful Truths because the games are going to be a little bit slower. And then we have a pile of counter spells, and Dispel is good against the Tarka Red, Duress is okay against them, Negate is probably worse than those two, but there are things like Rally the Ancestors, which I think the best way for Jeskai to beat them is with a clock and counter spell, so Monastery Mentor helps out there a lot. And I definitely want the cheap interaction against a Tarka Red, and Duress helps against decks like the Ramp decks. So that's about it. I'm going to hop in a league here, and we'll see how it goes.